Felicitations, malefactors! Welcome back to Random Pick. I'm Sam Bradley, your host, and today, this episode, we have our special guest is none other than Tim Eggleton, and we are going to be talking about video games, specifically one video game known as Bloodborne. Tim, why don't you introduce yourself and a brief overview of why you think Bloodborne is worth talking about?
Well, my name's Tim. I think Bloodborne is worth talking about because it's probably up there in one of my favorite games that I've ever played.
I would agree. I think I would probably put it on a top 10 list. I think if I had to really think about it, I think it would still end up on there.
It's just, I've played all the Dark Souls, co-op and not co-op, and there's just something about Bloodborne that makes it stand out. I think it's just because it has a different feel. That's one thing. But then there's also like just how fluid and good and tight the controls feel, plus the aesthetic of every area and how like every area is different. Every area has different enemies. It all feels different. So as soon as you're like bored of one area, you get to move into a different one with an entirely different feel. The story, you don't really even have to pay attention too much to kind of get brought into it. It brings you
Right.
into it of its own volition.
Yes, it does a very good job of keeping you enthralled in the world and keeps you in there because there's the overarching kind of there's like an overarching like theme or aesthetic, but each area, like you said, has its own unique aesthetics within that like umbrella that the game makes. And yeah, it's, I guess, specifically like one of the biggest things that I think is probably the most important when it comes to video games is the actual gameplay. Because if the gameplay's boring, then it's like, why are you playing the game? Like, to a certain degree. There are some games that do it okay, but
Yeah, well, even if a game is like really nice to look at or to think about, or has good writing even. Like there's been some games that have come out lately that I've really enjoyed the writing in, but because the gameplay was more bland or there wasn't as much choices in build styles, um, I just didn't find myself wanting to come back to it. It was good, but I'm only gonna play it once.
right.
Bloodborne's not really
And,
like that.
mhm.
In a way, every weapon and gun, or just using your fists, can make a new build going in. And they're all viable. And every setup you can do is viable. There aren't any bad choices for weapons. Now, there are some playstyles that are kind of difficult to adapt to, but the damage is still there. It's still possible.
Right. Like, I guess uh, the replayability of the game is just so high because of all of the different ways you can approach it. Like you said, you any weapon, you could basically like look at the entire list of weapons and be like, pick one, and then you just like whichever one either you think looks coolest or you like the move set the most, and you just kind of hone in on that, and then you can, customize your build towards that. So, for example, if you're gonna play like use like the Kirk hammer, you'll just make a kind of a strength character. But if you're gonna play like the Blades of Mercy or like the Rakuyo, you're gonna go for a more of a dex build. It's just based on whatever your playstyle is, how you build for the weapons you enjoy using.
This isn't a new thing to the Soul series, though.
Right.
And we know from all the other games that there are a lot of replayability in the Soul series. That's not the main reason why this stands apart so much. It's only the fact that every weapon is viable. And there has been examples of all the different things that you can do it with it. I can think of on like several people's playthroughs that I've seen. Um, some of the really difficult ones, even like arcane blood tinge combo. It's incredibly difficult to pull off, but if you do, it's probably one of the most damaging builds out there. It's it's rewarding for those hard builds and rewarding for the ones that are easy. It's not like, oh, I have this concept in mind, and when I get to it and actually put in the work, it's not going to work in the end game. It's like everything will work eventually. You just got to build up to it. I can think of a lot of other games where that's not true.
I guess one thing is I think another reason that I love Bloodborne so much is that it does a really good job of like having really strong gameplay and really strong story, and the soundtrack is amazing, and it just like has all of these like high quality elements that they're able to mesh together so well, and like because of that they compound and improve each other.
I would say if you go into this game thinking that it's just like you've played the other Dark Souls games and you're enjoying them, and you're like, okay, Bloodborne's on the list, might as well play it because the other ones are pretty good. I think you'll go into it because it's a Dark Souls game, but you will be in for a lot longer ride because you realize it's one of the better ones. Like if you
Yes.
play Dark Souls 2 or even Dark Souls 3, there are so many weapons in those games that are just bland. Like in Dark Souls 2 especially, if you choose one weapon class, it's pretty much got the same moveset through the whole
Yeah.
class. And you can change it up like how you're going to deal damage in that game, but it's pretty bland. Now, the mechanics of the game make it interesting for like PvPing, for instance. Probably
Hmm.
one of the strongest games for PvP. And that's one of Bloodborne's weak points actually. I would say is the PvP. Just because of the amount of healing available in that game, it makes PvP a lot more grindy than it should.
That's true.
It's because
That's true.
you're constantly popping heals and using the terrain to your advantage, and it's just a nightmare for the guy invading, unless you can punish those heals and get all the perfect parries and everything, which some people can
Or
do.
yeah, because you also get with the rally mechanic, you get health back mid combat too, without even have to use your uh like your vials.
Mm-hmm.
That's assuming you don't just one shot them with the cannon.
Sure. We can't all be Stake Driver Cannon Boy though, can we?
No, we cannot. Um, but so I guess one question I would have is, do you have a? Obviously, we've done several playthroughs of the game. Is there
Mm-hmm.
a specific build or weapon that you favor over the others? Since I think we've both probably at least used most, if not all of them, at some point.
Oh, I have all of them because I've platinumed everything. But I would say my favorite is the Burial Blade by far. Well, maybe not by far anymore, but it's not that it's just the highest damage weapon because it's not, and you can't even buff it. But it's just that the move set is so awesome and it feels so good when you're playing it that I
It's kind of
enjoy it
yeah,
probably more than all the others. Just
it's
because
a little flashy.
it has that variance of being very quick short range and having like a ton of long range attacks that
Mm.
really do the damage. And you can stun lock with R2s. So that's a thing.
Yeah. I would say for me, I will say I think my favorite character I've played through with is probably Stake Driver Cannon Man, because I just love that like combo, because it's just basically like you get
Oh, it
like
was pretty
one
awesome.
chance to do a ton of damage, which is great. But I think my favorite move set, I will say I really like the Bloodletter too. I think the Bloodletter is really cool. So I would say either the Bloodletter or probably the Moonlight Greatsword, because I just love that
Maybe I
in
should
all of the
ask
games. But
this. What would be your favorite weapon if you're playing solo?
oh, that's a good question. Playing solo?
Because the Burial Blade is mine for solo play.
Okay,
But
sure.
for like, if I'm playing co-op, I'm gonna go Arcane build. That's my favorite play thing to play.
Hmm.
Just because
Right.
it's so versatile and it works
Hmm.
so well for supporting everyone else's builds.
Hmm. Solo, I would probably say maybe Blades of Mercy, just because I kind of enjoy the R1 spam a lot of the times, especially with like a solo playthrough. Either that or maybe the Kirk Hammer, just because it's pretty reliable, and I usually on a solo playthrough would do a strength build.
Yeah, strength builds seem to be popular
Pretty
first
good.
playthrough for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
or I also really like the Whirligig Saw. That's another really cool weapon, but that's in the DLC, so not really viable
Yeah,
for a first playthrough of the game. So I'd say if you've never played Bloodborne, we both definitely recommend it. The first thing you want to think of is, I guess, we'll give some basic starting tips of if so essentially your four, I would say four main ways you could go for a build would be a strength build, a dex build, an arcane build, or a blood tinge build, which is
don't
really
do a blood
hard.
tinge build.
So don't do that your first playthrough. So instead of a blood tinge, you could do a quality build, which is like a balance of strength and dex, but won't
Which,
be super good until new game plus or like late game generally.
I mean, if you use the sock lever, it kind of just shreds everything.
That's true. Well, the saw
So
cleaver is just kind of
that's
broken as a weapon, in
quality,
my opinion.
and you get
But
it right off the bat. So like,
yeah,
if you just want to beat the game, just use a sock
hmm,
lever, upgrade it all the way, and like go quality.
that's
Because
true.
if you upgrade your strength for the damage for like the actual weapon, you upgrade your
Hmm.
skill a lot to do more damage with parries.
That's true.
Um,
And that's the weapon speedrunners use. Is the saw
yeah,
cleaver.
and parry damage is really really nice on your first playthrough because it can really save you. Um, and just getting good at parries in general is a really good idea for your first playthrough. And it's not hard to get good at it either. You
Right.
just practice on the enemies that won't kill you in one shot.
Hmm.
And then you get the timing down and you can pretty much apply it to any situation because it's very generous most of the time. And the difference
Hmm.
between you trying to fight Father Gascon
Yeah.
with parrying and without parrying is night and day.
Yes. Yes.
Because
It. I agree.
he also, if you're new to any Souls game and you're trying to play these, level health first.
Hmm.
Just
Yes.
get the bare minimum stats for your weapon. Do not care about damage. All you need to care about is health and survivability. Because otherwise the fights are gonna be a long grind where you're never getting anything done.
True. Yes. You definitely want health so that you can just not get one shot by certain bosses.
In new game, in most of the Dark Souls games, you really don't need to go too heavily into scaling.
Hmm.
it's not that necessary. I would just say work on health and armor, and then when you get into like New Game Plus and New Game Plus Plus, then start going really hard into damage. Because
Yeah,
once you have that weapon that you love, odds are that it's going to be a weapon that's a little bit tougher in the stats anyways. And sure, you can level up the scaling and two-shot a boss, but then it's not very fun to fight the boss because you two-shot him.
right.
So I would say keep the damage a little lower just so that you can fully experience each boss, and that way your health's higher and you can actually survive their attacks, especially for the DLCs, which
Yes.
are a true test of strength.
Yes. So I have a question. Speaking of bosses, um, I think this could be the same, but I want you to list the boss you think is the hardest in the game, and then your favorite boss in the game, and why.
Okay, the hardest one, I guess it would still be the Cost Parasite.
Oh yes, Orphan of Kos.
Or Orphan of Cost, yeah, sorry. Because I don't know, but he's gotten a lot easier for me lately because I figured out like how to work with him, like how his boss
Hmm.
fight works. I don't know. That's a tough question. I would say a lot of the tough ones come in the Chalice dungeons because you
Oh
just don't
sure,
do those as often. And like, for instance, a boss that's really easy in the game, just because you have so much damage, you can stagger chain them to death.
sure.
Um, in the Chalice dungeons, they have so much more health that you actually have to fight them legit. And it can be a little bit daunting. So, yeah, I'd probably still say Orphan of Kos. But if it was in the Chalice dungeons, I'd probably say Rom in the small room. Because that's a nightmare. She just keeps moving and summoning spiders, and she has so much health, and you can't one cycle her. So,
I would agree. I would probably say, yeah, what Chalice Dungeon boss, but like main, I guess main game and DLC. Like without Chalice Dungeon, I would probably say Orphan. Um, as for your favorite boss, I think we probably have the same one, if I had to guess.
yeah, just his boss opening to like his backstory to just how amazing his music is to just fighting him in general. I would have to go for Ludwig, the accursed
Yes,
slash
I would.
Ludwig, the Holy Blade.
Yes, I would agree with that because for those of you that don't know who have played the game, his boss theme, I believe, is sung entirely in Latin, and the music, the theme that you're listening to while you're fighting him is his backstory in Latin, and it's awesome.
The song, the boss music of the DLC is just phenomenal in general.
Yes,
But
I would agree.
especially him, because he's kind of like the first boss in DLC, and just
Hmm.
the opening and just fighting him. Ah, it's so awesome.
Yes, it's a ride, a wild ride of a boss fight. Especially like the first time, because you're just like kind of freaking out the first time you fight
Well, the
him, just
first
from
time you go into it, you enter the boss room, plays the intro, and you're like, "Oh, this is a cool boss," and then you're dead.
yep.
I
You're
mean,
just
he
like,
doesn't really
oh.
give you much chance to appreciate him because he'll just kill
Hmm.
you. But once you actually get into it and start like actually killing the first phase of the boss, you're like, this is a fun boss. And then he changes his move set and goes into one shot phase.
Hmm.
Um unless you have a lot of health, of course. I
Right.
mean, his fight is just phenomenal. But honestly, I have to say, of all of the Soulsborne games, the boss fights that I enjoy, like the game that has the most boss fights that I enjoy, is actually 3,
Okay. Yeah.
because just because of the Ring City DLC and the DLCs in general.
Mhm.
I love fighting the Demon Princes. I love
Mhm.
fighting Gale. I love fighting Midir. I really like fighting Frida.
Yep.
It's just a good time. I love fighting the Storm King.
Mhm.
I love fighting the last boss of the game.
Yep.
All of those
Soul of Cinder.
fights have, especially on New Game Plus 7, um,
Yeah.
well, maybe not Soul Cinder. Soul Cinder was kind of a pushover.
Well, that's true, but that's because we were leveled out of our minds.
But yeah, the last. Oh man, it was fun. Just yeah, me and Sam did do a playthrough of Dark Souls 3 on New Game Plus 7,
Yes, we did.
and I was a tank character and he was a mage, which we had it worked so well on our first playthrough. We're like, let's go to New Game Plus 7, and we
Mhm.
did, but we got stopped cold by the Ring City DLC.
Yeah, no, we got stuck on the Demon Princes for so long. It was a while because I think one, it was just the amount of health they had, and also they just like, since I was like our main damage, like you did pretty good damage too, but like
Yeah,
they
I
just also
was
resisted most of the magic damage that I did, so I wasn't at like peak damage output like I was on some of the other bosses. And
I
it
had 99 health. I had all Havels and a
mhm
Havel shield, and it was just a rough time because my job was to take aggro basically,
mhm
and I could do it, but the problem was there were two of them, and we tried a bunch of times and it just wasn't working. I think finally what happened was I was just showing, like, I think I was showing a friend, like, this is what the Demon Princess fight is like. And I was
mhm
using that character, and I beat it just solo.
That's right. Right, you did. I remember
I
that.
beat it solo. I text Sam saying, I just beat the Demon Princess fight. He's like, what? And then we like go forward from there and beat the whole DLC. And it was like,
Yeah.
what happened?
Yeah. I can't remember, was that one of the fights where I died and you had to finish the boss by yourself? I can't remember.
No, that happened mainly in Dark Souls 2,
Yeah, okay, fair
where
enough.
we would
I
go
think
up to like the fog gate, and I would be like, okay, let's do this boss. And like, I go in, and you come in, the boss one shots you, and I'm just like, well, I guess I'll kill the double health boss now.
Yep, that happened more times than I care to admit. Like
It was
enough
always
times where
me.
it's basically become a meme between us like at this point.
It's an in joke, definitely. But
um
and then
so
there's been other times where we're just going through the area, and we get to the boss at the end, and we like beat the boss, and then you're like, okay, I'll just put my sign outside the door, and I'm just like at the beginning of the level, and I'm just like,
oh yeah.
oh,
Yeah. You have
okay,
to run through the whole
sprinting through the
level.
entire level, just trying to get to the end.
I mean, to be fair, that happened a lot in Dark Souls 3, but that's because you had way more health than I did.
It was basically like be the courier for the very, very fragile mage, and then I just sprint through it, not caring.
Yes. Yes. So one thing, like kind of a last Bloodborne type question, to kind of segue back into Bloodborne is if you could add something to the game, whether it be a weapon or a boss or something like that. Have you thought about like, oh, this would be a cool addition to the game, like that you would want to put in as, kind of like something that you think would be really fun or just kind of cool to have?
Most of the weapons from Ruby,
Okay.
just because they're basically all trick weapons and they're awesome. Um, I think. See, they did a really good job in the DLC of like summing up the story in a way,
Sure.
but I feel like if they had like another DLC that wasn't quite as main canon-y
Mhm.
and was more of like a just like a story type of thing, like of for instance, most of the things have a story in Bloodborne, have a story that goes along with them. Most of the
Right.
areas do. So,
Yes.
like, Yarnum, when you start there, it's the area of people who were given blood by the Healing Church. And it's
Mhm.
just populated by the Healing Church. In the lower Berg, you're just, or not Berg, sorry. Um,
Lower
in,
Yarnum.
in, in lower Yarnum, we'll call it. It's just the people that were influenced by the blood that the church gave out. When you get later closer to the cathedral, it's just the actual like clergy is there. And then
Yeah.
you fight the vicar,
Mhm.
and that's like the end of the church area. And then you go to a side area and you have a story of the witches of Hemwick,
Mhm. Yep.
Hemwick Channel Lane. And then you go into the forest, and it's the forbidden woods between you and Bergenworth.
Mhm.
And then you get to Bergenworth. So every area is telling a story of what happened there or what's going on. And like for instance in the forest you have like the butcher's clothes, you know that he was there. You can read that item descriptions for him. Um that's where you find Volter, and it's just supposed to be like the transitional area, I guess.
Right.
There's not a lot that goes on in the forest, honestly. Oh, and you first see the alien, the kin, made
Yes.
by the old blood.
Right.
Um, and then you go into Bergenworth, and it has that whole story of it. Like it's the sum up story. It's a very very short area, but it's like this is where it all started. This is where Master Willem is.
Mhm.
Um, and you just
And
go
then
in
you
and you
meet.
find Rom.
Mhm.
And then the next thing is they break this nightmare, and then you basically go to Nightmare Town,
Yes. Yep.
where you can go there before, but it's like a whole different aesthetic now
Yes.
because the nightmare is there, and it's like everything is just blood and guts, and this is how things actually are, and
Yes.
it's
Very
very
visceral.
gritty. And then you get to the boss, and you're just like, nope.
Yep. Yes.
Like it's a it's just not a fun time. And you get to the end of the game, and it's basically all telling the story step by step of like deeper and deeper into what's going on in this town and like how to break this curse that's upon you because you want to get out of here, I guess.
Yes.
And you have three
And
different
without.
options for the ending.
Right. And without getting into too many spoilers for those who haven't played, that's a pretty good. That's like the first half of the game, maybe
A little more than
ish.
half.
A little more than half. But that's a good synopsis of like this is kind of what's happening, and I
And
think
there's like side areas and subplots going on
yes,
too.
which are
But
super
what I'd
fun to
like to
explore.
see I'd like to see something like more of like let's say so there's an area of the game called Canehurst Castle where
Hmm.
the Vile Bloods are and the Queen of the Vile Bloods are. And it's a really cool area because it's basically like a snowy vampire castle and
Yeah,
it's really awesome. So what I'm thinking is if there was more to the game, I would want it to be like I don't know, maybe an executioner hideout or a hunter of hunters place or
sure.
something that expands upon another covenant maybe.
Yeah, like maybe have it be like, oh, because you hear about like there's the three different like hunter factions. So there's like the hunters of hunters, and then there's also like the powder kegs, and like that'd be kind of a cool thing, like a powder keg hideout or something like that. Um, Maybe an NPC that is there, or you could meet like Carol, who's like the person who made the runes that you can use and stuff like that. Like that'd be kind of a neat thing. Just have them be either an NPC or maybe even a boss as like its own little side thing.
Maybe it can be more like you've had hunts before, right? And
Hmm.
we have these bosses in the Old Blood DLC, the Old Hunters DLC. And the Old Hunters is a really cool concept, but it happens in the future. What if you have basically you're going back to the first hunt and
Yeah,
Gehrman and Maria are both there, but they're NPCs. And maybe you're just like talking to all these NPCs that we've gotten to know through the game, but in a different light. That seems more of like a something a different game would do. That's more of an RPG and not as
sure.
dark. I don't think it's gritty enough to actually be an idea for like
To fit in the Bloodborne
to
world
fit
as
in
like a
Bloodborne
DLC.
because all of the all of the DLCs pretty much. Although I would say the Artorias of the Abyss DLC is kind of like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, something like that.
Like from what it sounds like, it sounds like it'd be interesting to make it almost like a tell type of a thing where it's very story heavy and it's
Like a
kind of like
what?
like a Telltale game, like the
Oh,
Telltale
yeah.
Batman or Tales from the Borderlands or something
I
like
was
that,
thinking
where
more
it's
along the lines of the DLC in Dark Souls 1.
okay.
It's not exactly dark, is it? Not at first.
Not at first. I
It's
mean, yeah.
actually very light and there's a lot of things happening, but it's still like really hard in
Yeah,
that
but like
area.
the ultimate like conclusion is that you did something good because you like saved Dusk
Right.
from Manus, basically. Like you
Well, and
live up to the legend of Artorias, and you like redeem his character basically for him.
yes, but you are the Legend of Artorias.
Right.
Like that's the whole point of the DLC, and I think that's really cool. I think you could do something like that. Like, but that would be pretty much copying Dark Souls 1,
Yeah.
and I don't think they would go for anything like that. It would be cool though.
Right.
To be
Oh.
perfectly honest with you, I
Mhm.
am pretty happy with the way
What
Dark
we
Souls
have.
or Bloodborne turned out, and it's really hard to think of another DLC idea
Hmm.
that is
It would just pale in comparison, probably. Like
yeah,
it'd be
because the
hard.
DLC they came up with was way awesome.
All right. So I'm going to I think we'll bring it to a close here. But I want to ask one last question. I usually end these with a hard like a question I would consider hard, so you have to think about it. Since we're on the subject of video games, I'm going to change up the question that I've asked the last two episodes. Um, But if you had to make I was going to say top 5, but that might be too hard. If you had to make a top 10 list of video games, your top 10 list, like right now, what would it be?
It's hard.
Yes.
Right now.
Yes.
All
Like,
right.
usually when I would do it, it'd be the first, not necessarily the first 10 that come to my head, because sometimes it's just like, oh, well, that's the last game I played, because it's the first thing that comes to your head. But like, yeah, I guess 10 games that you would consider putting on your top 10 list that are like really, really strong for you, of like top picks.
Bloodborne is the first one. Second one is Final Fantasy 15. Because I really, really, really enjoyed 15.
Mm-hmm.
Third one's probably Doom 2016.
Okay.
You know what? No. No. Let's put Doom 2016 at 4.
Okay.
Let's do... What was it? Where was it at? 3? Um,
Yeah.
for 3, I want to put Halo 1.
Okay. Old,
Just
nice, a
because
classic.
the campaign for that is just awesome. Let's see. 6. Oh, wait. I'd be at 5
Yep.
now.
They don't have to be in a specific order either. So,
Ark Survival Evolved.
okay.
I really enjoy just the sheer stuff you can do in that game.
Sure.
And just how, like, as a crafting game, it's pretty awesome. I think games like The Forest, which we recently finished, are
Yes.
actually better than it, like, conceptually. It's just that it has way more replayable value and way more
Sure.
content.
Sure. I would agree with that.
Um, so, number 6, Batman Arkham City.
Mm-hmm. It's a good one too.
7, Terraria.
I
Don't know why
figured
that's
that would
not
be
on
on
there
there somewhere.
earlier. I can't not put that in there. It's like I have so
Mhm.
many hours in it. Um,
Right.
what's 7? Ugh. Um,
Yeah,
there's
that
a
was
lot
your
of other good
7th.
ones I could do. Borderlands 2, have to put it in there.
Okay.
I'm not burnt out. It's just I've played so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's do. I'd like to say Hollow Knight as like an honorable mention
Mm-hmm.
because it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Salt and Sanctuary, I just really enjoy. Specifically playing it co-op.
Yes.
Like, playing it solo is not that much fun, but playing it co-op is awesome. It's so
Yes.
much fun to do. Because it's
Yes. I
so
would agree.
broken.
Yes.
um, Dark Souls 3 co-op
Okay. Sure.
would be the last one.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. I will give my top 10 as well, just so I'm not like asking you a hard question and not answering it myself. I think I'm gonna start doing that on these last hard questions to give I think it's a little more fair. Um, so I would say I do, these aren't in a specific order. I'm just saying these are probably my top 10. Bloodborne would be on my top 10 list. Dark Souls 3 would be on my top 10 list. Um, I would have to put Mega Man X on my top 10 list. This might be for pure nostalgic reasons, but Crash Bandicoot 2.
Yeah, maybe.
I think I would have to put on Arkham City. I would
Pretty
need, so
good.
that's 5. Final Fantasy 7, the OG. Even though I did really, really like the remake. Dragon Age Origins?
Really?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
I respect
loved
that.
that game.
Another honorable
Uh,
mention.
yes.
Sorry. Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic. You reminded me of
Mm,
BioWare.
yes, okay. I would put Hollow Knight on my top 10 list. Then I have 2 more. Fallout New Vegas. And then the 10th spot is like it's a tie between the new God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn.
Those are so good.
I loved both of those games so much. And it's just like I figured 10 to 11, that's pretty good. Like give yourself a 1 game buffer. I think that's pretty good. So, well
Can
with
I
that,
ask
I
you
think
a
those
hard
are
question?
sure.
Of
I'm
all of
curious.
the dungeon delvers you've played, because we've played a couple now,
Mhm.
what's your favorite?
Oh, like Diablo style games?
Mm-hmm.
Like that type of game, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, because we've
Titan
played a
Quest.
couple. Titan Quest?
Titan Quest, I think,
Yeah,
is easy. Like Diablo 2 is really close, but I personally think Titan Quest is just a more polished Diablo 2.
I really like all of the ones we've played, but I would
Mhm.
also have to say Titan Quest. I mean,
Yes.
I enjoy what's it called? Path of
Path
Exile,
of Exile. Yeah.
but Path of Exile is just
Dense.
grind.
It is grindy.
It is so grindy endgame. Oh my god. Okay. Well, that's all I needed to know.
Yep. So, all right. Well, that wasn't that hard of a question. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and chatting with me about Bloodborne and other various video games. Um, I would love to have you on the show again if you're so inclined. Perhaps we could pick a different topic or a different game or something of
Sure.
that nature to talk about. Um, but yeah,
Revenant.
Revenant.
Once we actually
Yes.
beat it, yeah.
Mhm. Or Remnant. Yeah. Um, Well, for those of you at listening at home, thank you for listening to the podcast. If you are listening on YouTube, please subscribe if you're so inclined, and give a like and leave a comment. If there's certain subjects you'd like to hear on the podcast, please leave those in the comments. I would love to be able to try and accommodate that by finding various people who are knowledgeable on the topic. So once again, thank you for tuning into Random Pick, and we'll catch you next time.